Last year, a board member asked me, "How many AI tools does your organization use?" I told him. He nodded and moved on. That was the wrong question, and he didn't know it. Neither did I until 6 months later. 6 months later, we're in the same room, and a different board member asked a different question. She said, "If one of our AI systems makes a consequential error, what is our accountability structure?" That question landed differently. Nobody nodded and moved on. There was a silence that told me everything I needed to know about where the real governance gap was. She had asked the right question, and we were not ready for it. Most boards are not asking the right questions about AI, not because they are unsophisticated, because nobody has given them a better frame. And if you walk into your next board meeting with a threat briefing, a vendor list, and a compliance update, you are reinforcing the wrong frame. This video is about the shift, what the wrong questions are, why they miss the real issue, and how to give your board the conversation that actually makes them useful. So, here are the 3 questions boards currently ask about AI. You've probably heard all of them. The first is the inventory question. How many AI tools do we use? Are we tracking them all? Do we have a full list? The inventory question feels like governance. It's not. An organization can have a complete AI inventory and still have no idea whether any of those systems are producing outcomes that they're prepared to be accountable for. Knowing what you have is not the same as governing what it does. The second is the compliance question. Are we compliant? Have we done a risk assessment? Does this meet the regulatory requirements? Listen, compliance is a floor, not a governance posture. A system can be fully compliant and still be operating without a defined accountability structure for its outputs. Compliance answers whether you pass the audit. It does not answer who is accountable when the model produces a biased hiring decision or a wrong clinical recommendation. The third is the probability question. What is our breach probability? What is the likelihood of an AI-related incident? What does the threat landscape look like? Boards can't act on probability. They can act on decisions. A breach probability of 34% does not tell a board what to decide. It tells them to be worried without giving them a role in fixing it. That is not a governance conversation. It's an anxiety transfer. All 3 of these questions have something in common. They put the board in the position of receiving information rather than making decisions. And a board that only receives information is not governing. It's auditing. The right question does something different. So the right question is, what AI-driven decisions is this organization prepared to be accountable for, and under what conditions? That is a risk tolerance question, not a risk inventory question. The difference matters more than most leaders realize. Risk inventory is a report. Risk tolerance is the decision. And the board's job is to make decisions, not receive reports. When you frame AI governance as a tolerance question, several things change. The board has to engage. You cannot nod at a tolerance question and move on. It requires a position. Are we prepared to use AI-driven recommendations in clinical triage without mandatory human review? Yes or no? What conditions change that answer? Tolerance decisions expose who owns the consequences. If the board approves AI-driven lending decisions up to a defined threshold, the accountability chain is explicit. That's governance. Compare that to a compliance report, which tells you what rules were followed, but never clarifies who answers when the model drifts. Security becomes a strategic function, not a technical one. When the conversation is about what the organization is prepared to accept, the CISO becomes a translator of business risk, not a reporter of technical metrics. That is the seat you actually want to be in. Here's the framework. 3 moves that shift your board briefing from a report to a governance conversation. Move 1. Lead with tolerance, not inventory. Do not open with how many AI systems you have or what your threat briefing looks like. Open with a tolerance statement, something like, our highest consequence AI applications currently operate with the following accountability structures. Here's where the board needs to weigh in on acceptable risk levels. That single reframe signals that you're there for a decision, not an update. And it puts the board in the right posture immediately. Move 2. Frame every discussion around consequence, not probability. Boards respond to consequence language, not to technical metrics. Instead of, we have 12 AI systems with unresolved governance gaps, say, these 3 AI systems, if they produce wrong outputs today, would create patient safety exposure, regulatory liability, or brand damage. Here is what a governance structure for each one of these requires. And here is what I need from the board to build it. Consequence language creates urgency without creating anxiety. Probability language creates anxiety without creating action. One of those is useful in a board meeting. And move 3. End with a decision, not an update. Every board briefing should close with something the board has to decide, not something they have to acknowledge. A decision means, do we authorize AI-driven outputs in this use case, under these conditions, with this accountability structure in place? Or do we require human review until the governance model is built? That is a board decision. That is governance. And it gives you something actionable to execute against when you leave the room. Put the 3 moves together and your board briefing looks like this. You open with the tolerance position. You walk through the highest consequence systems and frame each one around what wrong looks like and who answers for it. You close with the decisions you need. The board leaves the meeting having governed, not having nodded. Now, the practical question. How do you introduce this shift without making the board feel like they've been asking the wrong questions for the past 2 years? You do not tell them the questions were wrong. You give them better ones. Open your next session by framing the conversation differently from the start. Something like, I want to make sure this session gives you a real governance role in our AI posture, not just an update. So I'm going to structure this around decisions rather than reports. Then deliver the tolerance framing, walk them through your highest consequence systems, name the accountability gaps, make the ask explicit. Most boards respond to this immediately because the honest truth is that most board members have felt slightly lost in AI security briefings for the past 2 years. They've been receiving threat intelligence they could not interpret and compliance updates they could not evaluate. A decision-based briefing gives them traction. It tells them what their role actually is. One caution, do not over-engineer the first session. Pick 2 systems, frame the tolerance questions clearly. Make one specific ask, let the board get a win, build from there. The shift from inventory briefing to governance conversation does not happen in a single meeting. But the first meeting that ends with a real board decision, instead of a polite nod, is the meeting where your role in the organization changes. Boards keep asking the wrong questions about AI because nobody has given them the right frame. That's not their failure. It's an opportunity. The CISO who walks in with a tolerance framework, consequence language, and a decision request is the one who gets a governance partner instead of a passive audience. That is a different kind of board relationship. And it's available right now in your next meeting if you change how you walk in. 3 moves. Lead with tolerance, frame around consequence, end with a decision. If you're already running this kind of board conversation, I want to hear what's working. Put it in the comments. And if this framework is useful, share it with someone who needs it before their next board meeting. This is the conversation the whole field needs to be having. Subscribe for more. This is what we build here.